Hello, I'm Cindy Johnson with the Grand Island Chamber of Commerce. And in the interest of helping to educate our business leaders and community leaders on the important candidates that are running for elected office, we've put together a Zoom conference this morning. We have two candidates, two of the four that are running for City Council, Jack Sheard and Michelle Fitzke, and we're going to hear from them in just a few minutes on topics of interest to the business community. We have a set of questions that they have been provided in advance of this Zoom conference, so they've had some time to think about what their answers to the questions would be, to be thoughtful and deliberate in their responses to the questions that we are proposing this morning. At the end of our session, the candidates will each have an opportunity to ask each other a question, and then we'll do wrap-up comments to see if there's anything that we left behind that they felt they really wanted to share with the viewing audience. And then this Zoom conference will be loaded to the Chamber's website and Facebook and can be shared by as many people who wish to. So
I'm online now.
Oh, great.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, and we have been joined by Alan Pickerel, and he is the third of four candidates for the City Council position. And this is in City Council Ward 1. So we'll start with introductions. We're going to go in alpha order. So that means you, Michelle Fitzke, kick off the intros.
Thanks, Cindy, and thank you to the Chamber for doing this. In this changing world, I guess, that we're living in today, you know, it's kind of different doing a by WebEx, sorry. My husband and I, Marty, have lived here in Grand Island for 33 years. I actually have lived in Grand Island for 35 years. We have two boys, Andrew, who is 28, and Tyler, who's 25. They both live in Lincoln. They graduated from Grand Island Senior High. Marty works for Aurora Co-op, and I work at Hornady Manufacturing. I've been there for 25 years. In my time of living here in Grand Island, I've been involved with the Grand Island Senior High Booster Club for 8 of those years. Served a shoot for 22 years. I went through Leadership Tomorrow, been on Leadership Tomorrow's board. So I try and be as involved in the community as possible. It's very important to me. So that's basically me.
Thank you, Michelle. Appreciate that, learning more about you. Alan, we will go to you. I will unmute your phone and you should be ready.
All right. Can you hear me now? Okay. I don't know. Okay. My name's Alan Pickerel. My wife and I reside here in Grand Island now. Originally, I was born and raised Central City, Clark's area. I graduated from there, and then I went to college in Central Tech, and I farmed for 20-some years. Then I started working as an electrician for Bosman's in Grand Island here. And from there, I moved on to Columbus as a building inspector, electrical inspector and stuff. And then I ended up here in Hall County when they started the position up again. I served on the school board for 12 years. I've served on a public power district for 4 years, active in the towns that I've been in. I guess we have 3 children. One is up in Neely, he works for the ESU unit. Have one that's a city clerk over at Wood River, and one that's in a building in Oklahoma. My wife is an RN. She works in home health care. And right now I'm still working for Hall County as a building inspector. And that's it.
Thank you, Ellen. We appreciate learning about you. And Jack, let's hear a little bit about you.
Well, thanks, Cindy. Since moving to Grand Island 15 years ago, my wife and my young sons at the time, we've loved Grand Island. I've always loved Grand Island. We came for a job and stayed because this is a great place to raise a family, be active, and grow professionally. It is because I love Grand Island. That's why I'm running for office. My wife, Melissa, and I have been able to both give and to receive from this great community in the 15 years we've lived here. We've been blessed to see our sons go through our great schools. One graduated in 2019 and is currently serving in the United States Air Force in Korea. And the other is a junior. Experiences and vast diversity they have grown up with prepared them for the world. And that, I just love that. I love what Grand Island has given them. And I want Grand Island to be the place where they are proud to someday raise a family. I've been involved in a number of organizations in town, volunteering, being on boards, being on committees, doing everything I can to help the community grow and be as great as it is. I'm a past president of the Leadership Tomorrow Board of Directors. And running for city council is kind of the next way I can show my appreciation for Grand Island and serve the community. I believe in public safety. I believe in fiscal responsibility. And education and communication and growing pride in Grand Island. That's what I want. So I think I got muted there at the end, so I hope I didn't get cut off.
No, that was me. I apologize for that.
All right.
I picked you right back up. All right. So Zoom is new for many of us. Any screw-ups along the line, I take complete and total responsibility for. Okay, as we discussed earlier, we are going to start with a set of questions. The first question will be tossed to Ellen. We'll go around. It'll be Ellen and then Jack, and then Michelle. And then the next question, we will start with Jack. Next question, we'll start with Michelle, et cetera, et cetera. All right, so Ellen, the first question, we start with you. What is the most important role a council member plays? What is the most important role a council member plays?
Has to be a referee. You have to take in account of the good of the people. We can't be singling out for single people. I like to treat everybody fairly and everybody the same. And I guess we need to assess when we have projects or expenditures, is it good for the whole community or just good for a few? That needs to be assessed. And I guess fiscal responsibility, everybody's for that. We can't be spending money we don't have. And we can't just keep raising taxes just to spend. I mean, somewhere we have cut rather than just a raise. I guess that's what I'm looking at.
Thank you, Alan. All right, so we will go to Jack.
All right. Council should be filled with level-headed individuals who care about Grand Island, our community, our budget, our businesses, our infrastructure and public safety, our future, and most of all, we should have people who care about our people. That's what I think about with the council, and I think it just comes down to making logical, good decisions for the greater good of the community.
I like
Again, you muted yourself.
I think I'm going to leave myself on unmute the whole time. Thank you for limiting your responses to 2 minutes. I neglected to share that with the viewing audience. Okay, Michelle.
I think that the most important part is, like everyone has spoke about, is, you know, we are the voice for the area, for our ward, for our constituents. We have to keep a very good listening to them, and take into consideration what our constituents want to see done in our city, and we are the voice for them. So, you know, being a very good listener is probably the most important thing that I learned from the first 4 years that I served on council, and would take into consideration, you know, your budgets and other things that go on within making the city run. But listening is very important.
Thank you, Michelle. Okay, question number 2. We start with Jack. You ready? What impact is COVID-19 having on the city's finances? What steps might the city need to consider with expenditures during this pandemic?
COVID-19 on the city's finances. Certainly the budget will take a substantial hit. Obviously the city has always tried to be run on a tight budget at all times. So simply tightening the belt won't be the master plan here. I think hard to see the structure and services are all going to need to be made. So prioritizing what we can accomplish until city revenues rebound, and prioritizing public safety has to be the way to go here.
Thank you, Jack. We will go to Michelle for the next answer.
COVID-19 has taken a lot of toll on our city. Our electric department has made the decision to work with those that have been out of jobs or whatever to delay some of their payments, which puts a strain on the city to some degree. We've laid off 23 full part-time people. You know, we've had to make some tight decisions, and our men and women in the fire and, you know, police department are making some major sacrifices right now for our city. And we need protected. And so in other ways, we're going to have to become very creative of what we can do with our budget to make sure that we have our public safety protected in all ways. And again, we are cutting jobs. I mean, just the other night, they spoke about cutting 23 jobs and how it affected $17,700 on our weekly budgets. You know, so budget's a big thing right now, and this is going to play a big impact on it. We have a lot of public course, you know, our golf closed, and we had to become creative of what we do with some of our people.
Thank you, Michelle. Ellen, the question to you: what impact is COVID-19 having on the city's finances, and what steps might the city consider to address expenditures during this pandemic?
Well, as we know, the city workers are working one or 2 days a week, and so maintenance around the city, potholes and the other things that go on every day are not being done. So our maintenance in the city is not where it probably should be or can be. So I think probably when this does end, we need to probably put a hold on all new infrastructure and try to repair and get back to where we were before this started. I guess the one thing I'd like to see them consider is the tax for the restaurants, because they've suffered horribly. Drop the tax that they put on the restaurants, and let them get back up and going again before we enter it back in.
Thank you, Alan. The next question, we start with Michelle. Michelle, what is the #1 issue facing the city of Grand Island, and how would you work to address this issue?
I think right now our #1 issue that's going to be a real big deal is our budget, along with our public safety in the next year or so. And as most people have listened, when you go to do the budget for the city, you try to look out 5 years, because what is really going to happen to our city in the next 5 years? And every year impacts it for what's going to happen in the next 5 years because of like Alan said, you have your restaurants that don't have the businesses as much, so that's going to impact your tax and beverage. And so working with the budget and keeping our public safety is going to be very important, and it's going to be a tough one. We've had to cut some programs because of the COVID-19. And how do we get that back on? Like I said, the budget is probably the most important thing. We're learning, we're gonna have to put money back into paying for the bills at the City Hall.
Thank you, Michelle. Ellen, that same question goes to you. What is the #1 issue facing the city of Grand Island, and how would you work to resolve this issue?
Well, I think the #1 issue right now is affordable housing. We have housing costs have just skyrocketed, which they have everywhere, but we don't look at what affordable housing is and how to address it enough. There are programs out there, and I think we need to revisit how they're used and utilized. The tax increment financing, I'd like to address that and see how it's working, and just adjust the merits that it is. And I guess that's what I'd like to see done. We just don't have enough housing for the people that are here. And of course, you can't, if you don't have housing for what's here, you can't bring in new industry if there's no place to live.
Thank you, Ellen. Jack, that question to you.
Yeah, I think the biggest issue is all issues in one, I guess, and I consider it smart growth. How we're going to think about growth and think how we can continue to do so without sacrificing quality of life, public safety, and our infrastructure now, and city revenues in the future. Like Michelle said, budgeting 5 years out, you got to make decisions as we grow, and we all want to continue to grow. But you got to make decisions that aren't going to sacrifice the future for the city for immediate gains, whether through the tax increment financing or other incentives and programs. We need to analyze the long-term sustainability of our growth. Obviously, with my current position with the public schools, I always have an eye on education. And as we grow, we need to figure education into the equation as well. Every time we grow neighborhoods, we have to think about where the kids are going to go to school that live in those neighborhoods. So we also need to keep our eyes on the diversity of our community. And the diversity makes us great. I think it's what makes our community so strong. Well, whether it's cultural or social, economical, or however else we see diversity, we need to understand our community looks differently than it did 20 years and 10 years than it looks now. So we need to plan for smart growth across all indicators, where we're going to be in the future, and that planning starts now.
Very good. Next question, question 4. We start with Alan. What opportunities do you see for more shared governmental services, which would result in greater efficiencies, less duplication of services, and therefore less tax revenues required? Ellen, we start with you.
Okay, I guess what I'd like to look into anyway. It seems like most departments, you have a department head, and then you have 2 or 3 supervisors under that, job force workers going out there. And I need to look at, do we really need all the supervision, or can some supervisors, let's say, double up or do more than what they're doing and do it with fewer people?
Thank you, Alan. Jack, we'll have you answer this one.
I guess, you know, when you talk about sharing services, it can be quite effective if all sides agree to the plans. I like to think that when you get the right people at the table and start looking at the issues, you can set emotions aside and past practices aside, if possible, and think logically on how we can be more efficient, we can come to some pretty powerful solutions. Hall County is quite strapped. Obviously, COVID-19 hasn't helped anyone. So if there are services we haven't explored combining, and they can be done without a loss in effectiveness, I think we should be having those discussions. Ultimately, there's only so much you can do with a certain budget. So finding innovative solutions should be considered at every level in every conversation. I do think that it's easy for us to look at a structure of management and different levels. I want to caution us to always think that there were people in those positions were needed at some point. So I don't want to ever just say, well, we've got too many of this or too many of that. I respect the people that made those decisions to say we needed those at one time, but we can always look at it and see if there's duplications that we can clean up and see if we can be more efficient.
Michelle, the question to you, what opportunities do you see for more shared governmental services?
There's a lot of things that we currently do share already in the city that I want to make sure people understand. 911 is a shared service with Hall County. The library is a shared service with Hall County. You know, there are, the health department is a shared service of us and Hall County. Cannot cross over and share. I think that what there is an opportunity to share is more resources within City Hall itself. Like Jack said, I would agree, and with him is maybe they have a reason of why they're not sharing those. Maybe years ago they tried it, it didn't work out, and so those divisions were split up back then. However, with the way we are operating in today's world, we need to take a relook at what can we share? Can the CRA have people that could share with, you know, the front office? There's just several that possibly we could share. I think the main thing that we need to sometimes take back and look is, can our ITs share resources? Because that's a big resource for everyone to take a look at of sharing. So, but there are those areas that you can't share, and those are tough areas also. Thank you.
Thank you. Jack, the next question comes to you first. What are your top priorities for the city of Grand Island?
Well, again, I think growth in a smart way is what we have to have our eyes on. But the top priorities would be, for me, public safety always number one. I think it starts with that. You can't do anything else unless you have a strong public safety solution for a long term. Beyond that, I think fiscal responsibility and transparency needs to always be at the top of the mind as a priority. Again, education. I'm a strong proponent of education always being a priority. I think that's the best way to grow a community. I think it's the number one way out of poverty. I think it's the #1 way to build workforce and to have sustainable growth is through strong education. Again, I'm a communicator, so I think communication should be a priority. And then the final priority I would have at the top of the list of 5 top priorities is growing pride in Grand Island for all those that call this community home. It just sometimes I see it and sometimes I see a lack of it. And I want all of our great people in Grand Island to feel proud, like I do, to live in Grand Island.
Thank you, Jack. And I think I have this mute unmute thing down. Michelle.
My top priority has been and always will be public safety. That is, I mean, we're not a safe opening community unless we have those taken care of. The budget has always been a big thing. Keeping a good budget makes us a good city, makes us make sure we're using our dollars appropriately. And there's always room for improving that, of course. Bringing new businesses to town is very important to me, because if we're bringing new businesses to town, we're growing our society or our community. I am very proud of Grand Island. Like I said, I have lived here for 33 some years, and I've seen this community change so much, and it's been a blessing. I mean, it really truly has. And you got to grow the community in order to bring our young adults back, and bringing the young adults back to our community after they've been in college somewhere else that's a big plus for Grand Island. And then last, but yet one of my very high priorities is our tax dollars, how property taxes or lower some of the tax dollars here in Grand Island.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you, Michelle. Ellen, we'll throw that question to you. What are your top priorities for the city of Grand Island?
Well, I think, like the others who stated, we have to have fiscal responsibility. You know, everybody wants to know that we're stretching the dollar as far as we can to the best utilization that we can come out of it. Safety, you know, the police, and enforcement of the laws. I think probably we need to reassess some of the top priorities that we had in the city council have changed, and the whole thing will have to be reassessed as what a top priority is that's already been, I guess, put in works, that whether it is a priority anymore or now it needs to slip to the back burner. I guess that's what I'm at.
Thank you, Alan. We'll start the next question with Michelle. What role does or should the city play in ensuring that this area is friendly?
I think that's a big question for our community. You know, we have to be open, I guess I should say, to welcoming new businesses to our area. Sometimes that's even finding incentives to bring them here, because in today's world, there's so many people fighting for businesses to come to their community, and we want them to come to our community. Affordable housing has to be out. We have to be welcoming. You know, they want to know that they're going to have a safe community. So again, that brings you back to your making sure you have public safety for that business to look at, because they don't want to bring people here if they don't feel like it's a safe community. And the education is very important, and we have some of the top education right here in Grand Island. And so I think just being open armed to them and welcoming them and showing them good points of our community, whether it be the Chamber of Commerce or other businesses, of how they can work themselves into our community.
Thank you. Jack, the question to you, what role does or should the city play in ensuring this area is business friendly?
There we go. I think the city should always be business friendly. Red tape from long ago should be up for reconsideration if it is creating unnecessary burdens and preventing smart growth for our community. At the same time, the city can't continue to offer up one incentive program after another at a sacrifice of future revenues. I truly believe the best incentive program we can invest in is education of the workforce and keeping the best and the brightest in Grand Island. As I said before, I want Grand Island to be the community in which my sons raise their families. It isn't a business incentive alone that will keep them here. It's a quality of life, it's public safety, it's education, it's progressive city that they can afford to live in and have that pride in. Affordable housing is so important to this. Workforce development is as important a role as anything else for the city to play in being business friendly. Obviously, again, I've got some experience on the inside of that part of it. As Michelle said, we have great education here in Grand Island, and we need to continue to use that and leverage that. Combining forces with not just the education, but the chamber, the Economic Development Corporation, even the CVB, all with the city government and local government, all working together. I think we can continue to be a community that is business friendly and grow on that with, again, an eye on smart growth.
All of you have talked about the importance of being fiscally responsible, whether you referenced it in your priorities or in the challenges facing the city. Each of you has identified the financial situation and the challenges with COVID as something that will need to be addressed. One of the major expenses of any governmental entity, and I would argue a lot of organizations and businesses as well, is the personnel. And in the state of Nebraska, we have a Commission on Industrial Relations that assists with establishing wages and looking at conflicts between employees and management if there is a conflict. What are your thoughts on the Commission on Industrial Relation and the role that this group plays in establishing the city's budget? And we will start with Alan.
I guess I've had the pleasure of working with the commission on a couple of occasions. I think their role is overstated. It still comes down to fiscal responsibility. I think people don't go into arbitration unless they do have a reason for it. So as far as I'm concerned, the court is like a last minute attempt at something that probably shouldn't even be at that point. They're a last opportunity to make a decision.
Thank you, Alan. Jack, what are your thoughts on the Commission of Industrial Relations?
Well, this is going to be one of those areas, if I am elected, I'm going to have a lot to learn about. I will be honest. I haven't worked with the CRI or CIR. You got the acronym wrong when I said it quickly there. But look, I don't think unions are terrible. I know that unions have a bad name, and I also don't think city managers trying to live within a budget are terrible either. I think one of the things that gets left out when we get into the conversation when cities talk about negotiations and contracts and unions and wages is when these are our neighbors we're talking about. These are the citizens of Grand Island on both sides of that. And again, maybe I'm rose-colored glasses about the power of sitting down and having good conversations, but I agree. If we can if we can balance things on the front end and treat people right and allow them to earn a wage that they deserve, along with living under a budget for the community and the businesses and obviously the city government, trusting and valuing both sides of all negotiations and hoping, like Alan said, that we don't get to the CIR.
Michelle, what are your thoughts on the CIR and the role this group plays in the city's budget?
I'm going to be honest, I'm kind of like Jack. I don't have a lot of experience with this. The most experience I have with the CIR is when I was on city council and serving and doing the negotiations between the firemen and the police officers and the utilities divisions. Those were probably the most experience that I had. And I would have to say that from what I saw, it all worked out very well. We were able to sit down at the table and go back and forth on wages, on benefits, and on different things that they wanted versus what the city wanted to give them, or whatever. The two groups worked very well together. Go any further than just making those negotiations, but it plays a big role. Once you know that, it plays into your budgeting too, once you've made those negotiations. So I'm kind of the type of person that likes to sit down at the table and let's talk this out and work it out. So.
Very good. All right. Those are the questions that I had prepared in advance that our group looks at, wanting to see the answers or hear the answers from the candidates and know how you are going to feel about issues that are going to impact the business community. The next phase of our interview today will be for you all to ask one of your fellow candidates a question. And since Ellen started the last round robin, Jack, you will start the question of one of your fellow candidates.
Very good. It was hard for me to choose which one of you to ask this of, but honestly, I'll use it for personal gain here. I'll be totally honest. Alan, I appreciate that you've served on a school board, and that's really, I think, serving is fantastic. But my question is for Michelle. You've served on city council already before. What was the hardest part of that? If I get elected, I'd kind of like to know, what did you?
Well, that's a great question. First of all, I guess it does go back to the budget. We had to, the very first year that I served on city council, we had to make some major budget cuts. And it was to public safety. And that was probably the hardest thing I had ever done. The second hardest thing was probably the year that I was getting off and we had approved that we were going to hire 6 more firemen. And I had just been off a month, possibly 2 months, and they reversed that. I understand to some degrees why they reversed it, but those are hard things. Those are very hard decisions to make. And we also had to cut some people from just little things in the city that, they were seasonal workers, but that's still, those are the budget. Those were probably some of the hardest things that I had to do as a city council person.
Michelle, your turn to ask a question of one of the other candidates.
Okay, well, my question, I guess, is going to go to Alan. And I am just curious of what made you decide to run for city council?
I guess it's just a chance to put the everyday spin on what the city council is and does. I know I'm not a, what do you want to say, high eloquent talker, but I have been on the board before and have learned to give and take, but also on how to approach some issues that are very sensitive. And I guess I just had seen the opportunity and I took it.
Thank you, Alan. Now it's your turn to ask one of the other candidates a question.
I guess, well, I guess we can ask him. Jack, I guess I have a question. On schools, you know, we're building schools, quite a few of them. We got a lot of tax bond out there. Do we ever come to a point where, you know, we've got to back off, or do we assess the school situation right?
Alan, that's a great question, and that's for the public schools. I'm in on those conversations quite a bit, and I'll tell you, obviously on our end of things, we're looking at it through a lens of education is extremely important, but we also have a lot of different people keeping us in check. As a former school board member, you know kind of what that's like. We've got 9 school board members that not only do they hold us accountable, but the community holds us accountable. We know that infrastructure in our schools and the safety of our schools, mixed with making sure they're a modern learning environment, is always going to be a balancing act. Is it safe enough? Is it strong enough? Is it a good enough environment? That I can tell you the schools that we've replaced recently needed it badly. I liken it to, I didn't think when I first moved to Grand Island that we really needed another jail until I toured our old jail. And then I was the first one saying, we need a new jail. Anyone who went through these schools in the last few years knew, well, you know, there's only so many seats in a classroom. And then to be effective and to be efficient, this community has said in our research what they want out of their schools, and we continue to listen to that. That's why our schools are so strong. When you get in them and see what's happening, it is so much more than 4 walls and desks, but it requires a safe environment. And I won't apologize for us building the schools we've had and listening to the community and you know, coming through on the promises that they've asked us to make. We've made the promise and we've kept them. So if that answers your question, yeah, we need.
You guys are rock stars. Thank you for joining us on this Zoom conference. What a challenge it is to get through some of our new technological opportunities that present themselves. For us at the Chamber, this was a way, again, to introduce candidates to our business community and those who will be voting in the City Council Ward 1 district. Again, we'll have this forum on our website and on our Facebook, hopefully later today, perhaps tomorrow, depending upon how long it takes to download. And then you are free to share that with anyone and everyone that you would like to. Now, as we wrap up today, I'd like, and we'll start with, looks like Jack. Jack, wrap up your presentation. This is your opportunity to do a 7-second soundbite or a 30-second commercial on Jack Sheard for City Council.
Well, first, Cindy, thank you, and thank you to the Chamber of Commerce, not only for putting this on, but for all you do to help support growth in Grand Island and support businesses. You know, the reason I'm running is pretty simple. I love Grand Island and I love my family. And I've said it before, I want my sons to choose to come back and live in Grand Island and raise their families. And I'm honored to be on the ballot. And I was in leadership tomorrow and on the board there. I think it's awesome. There are 4 people running for this that we give options for the community to vote for. I would always love to have those options if I'm a voter. Not necessarily the race I'm running for, but I do feel honored to be with such strong candidates, people with experiences. I like to think I bring something new. I've been in Grand Island for 15 years. I've raised my kids here. I want to stay here. I want to see Grand Island grow and grow smartly and keep a focus on what's important. And that's public safety, infrastructure, education, growing pride in Grand Island. So I think adding a little new blood with my thinking, I think we can get a lot done. Again, thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Jack. Michelle, you are up next.
Cindy, I just want to thank you and everyone out there who is listening to us negotiate or debate on all the stuff that's going on in the city today. I have served on the city council for 4 years. I absolutely loved it. I love this community. I was a member of Leadership Tomorrow, and I always said, if you want to see our city to grow, or if you're upset with something, then become involved in it. And so that is why I chose to run for city council, is because I want to be involved in it. I want to be that voice for the people out there. And I truly want to promote our city to bring some of the young people back here. And we have an education here in Grand Island that they should take a look at. Don't always look at the big cities. We're just as good.
Thank you. Ellen, final comments from you.
Well, I guess the reason I ran Grand Island, where I grew up, was always my go-to destination. We finally ended up moving here. I've been here about 4 years or so. We've always been to Grand Island. I like the town. I guess, yeah, we need to be fiscally responsible, and I think we all agree on that. Safety. I guess we need to, look at trying to get more business in here. Sustainable industry, something that's needed everywhere all the time to keep our town growing. And of course, like I said, we need affordable housing to have a place to people live. I guess I'm running just to, put my take on what's going on.
Thank you, Alan. I think it's fair to say that the citizens and residents of the City Council Ward 1 are in good shape. I look forward to working with one of you after the November election. Thank you for joining us today.